welcome to Check It Out, Comrade. I'm Nick Glauber.
And I'm Gary Butterfield.
This is our indie game podcast where every other week we will bring you two indie games that we enjoy, want you to check out, and give you a little bit of our opinions on both those games.
Yeah.
So this week, Gary, we're going to do Papers, Please.
And Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons.
Yeah.
So it could have been Uncles, A Tale of Two Sons, or Grandpa's A Tale of Two Sons. But yeah, every brother is a son. Yeah. So which one do you want to tackle first?
Well, let's go for Papers, Please. I think it fits our theme of all of our iconography and everything. It's a good fit for the podcast.
That we're communist.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so there's going to be increasing amounts of communist propaganda that slips into the podcast, and secret codes and ARGs and various campaigns we're going to mount. So. Yeah. Come out of this, red-blooded Stalinist, vodka-drinking, bear wrestling.
That's the actual purpose of the podcast. We make it feel like it's about indie games. It's really about taking down the USA. And
United States in the 80s.
Yeah, in the 80s, right.
Yeah. Papers, Please. It's a puzzle. I guess it would be a puzzle game.
Yeah. It's definitely a puzzle game, just a very weird format.
Yeah, puzzle game. It's made by Lucas Pope. So more or less made by one dude. Or not more or less. There's no more or less to it. It's made by one guy.
Yeah, made by one guy.
Yep. Came out in 2013 on August 8th, but there was a demo before that contained much of the game. Came out, I think, in March.
Yeah.
And, it is a puzzle game. It's got a really interesting premise. Like, one of the things we want to do with the show is drill down to, what's cool about this thing? Like, what's noteworthy about it? And this game really plays into that because it's even hard to classify. Like, it's definitely a puzzle game, but it's also a paperwork simulator.
Yeah, it's definitely, the mechanics of it are purposely meant to be frustrating and increasingly complex.
Mm-hmm.
So the puzzle portion is really just remembering which rules are specific to this day and not forgetting all the previous rules that have been tacked on.
Yep. So on the basic, basically what it is you run a checkpoint, checking people's immigration documents in a fictional nation, like Arstotzka. Arstotzka.
Arstotzka.
Arstotzka. It's a fictional Eastern Bloc, country, and you win like a lottery and get this job, so you can feed your family, who are all in various states of fragility, and so you're checking people's immigration documents, and that's what the game is. But the way that it gets more complicated, not, it's hard to even say not boring because it's very tense, but the premise itself is really boring. Is these rules, so it's kind of like a bureaucracy simulator as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like heavy red tape. Every time the borders are open for the first time on your first day. And at first it's just like only people who are actually natives of this country can come back in now. And then the second day they're like, okay, now we're going to let people in if they have passports.
Yeah.
But as you're doing this, opening the borders is also opening up the country to more terrorist attacks. And even people who you let in because all the paperwork's right, come in and immediately blow themselves up, killing all the guards at the border, which then, of course, causes more rules to be implemented so that they can try and filter it down even further.
Yep. Yeah, and those are, some of you can't prevent those. They're story events.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of terrorist things.
There's no way.
Which makes this kind of an interesting, post 9/11 commentary.
Yeah, that's true.
On the TSA and our kind of tightening borders and such after that.
The thing about the taxes, every single one of them is from someone who you've let in because all of the rules were right for them. Like, they passed all the tests, you let them in, and then terrorist attack. So therefore, our rules aren't strong enough.
Yeah, and that's exactly the wrong response, because what happens then is you are able to let in fewer people, more people who by rights should have this freedom are denied it. And it's like one of the heavy themes of this game is that like there's no you can't stop random violence. Like you can't make enough rules to prevent random violence in the world.
And what comes out of all these rules getting increasingly more complex is that honest, good people who otherwise would have been able to get in have issues, or saying they're going to be murdered if you send them back to the country they've come from. You get faced with all of these dilemmas that they don't have the right paperwork.
Yeah, or there's a misspelling, or their gender is wrong, like something even really minor.
Yeah.
And to add to that, so I mean, you're already feeling conflicted. Like this belongs in that pantheon of games like The Walking Dead, where the making decisions and feeling shitty about it is one of the central things that you spend time doing.
Exactly.
Is the fact that you have to provide for your family, and your performance determines how much money you get in this thing. So if you're not being ruthless about it, you can, so you can be docked pay eventually if you start making these mistakes. You get 2 mistakes a day, and that's not very much.
Right.
Like I had this game is hard. Like I never beat it properly. I never escaped.
Yeah, I've got, I got, I don't know, 10 days in or something, and at that point it was so complex. It's like, but like you said, you only get so much money. Even if you don't get docked any pay, it's still really difficult to keep your family warm and fed and healed when they get sick. Yeah. So you then also start turning towards, like, you get offers from some people who are willing to give you a little on the side to let some things slip. And, of course, I mean, the government's not paying you well enough. You're dead broke. So you also get conflicted between actually letting in people shouldn't be in and aren't good, honest people who are willing to give you personally a little bit extra to let themselves through.
Right, because you're thinking about your family. And the way that the family mechanic works is really ingenious because it's a slippery slope. Like you start skimping on food or heat, and that's what's going to make people sick. Yep. And once they get sick, you pay for medicine instead of heat, and that's going to make another member of your family sick. So the deck is stacked against you in such an incredible way as to force you to make these compromises, which is it's really elegant in that it's not, there's no real right answer to any of this stuff. And in addition to letting in people who should not be good, you can also use those mistakes to let in people who you can let people slip by who you feel like are good people. And your only gameplay reward for that is like you get like a token and you can collect them all. But
did you see, like, have you ever collected them all? I don't know if there's anything that actually comes of that, but
I think I've got 3 or 4 of them.
I had 2 or 3, I think, and it's like you let someone in who shouldn't be in, but is very obviously a good, honest person who isn't trying to kill anybody, and suddenly you have a little gem on your desk.
Yep. And I think making that not a mechanical benefit like really reinforces what the game is doing, because there's no right answer. Like that would be the right thing to do in a BioWare game. Like you would get extra XP, or they'd come help you against the final boss, like when you fight Mecha Stalin or whatever.
You get the Paragon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but not here. No, the game needs to acknowledge that you did something, but it can't actually reward you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which is great.
It is fantastic.
It's really layered too. So like all these things we're talking about are cool things, and then you introduce these little plots that happen in the game. Like there's a group that's looking to take down the government, which you're not a big fan of. You can start making compromises for them. They give you encrypted messages that you have to decode in between doing your job.
Yeah. As people are coming through and you're checking their papers, you also have these 2 slips you're trying to figure out what they mean.
Super neat. Like it just
I agree.
Yeah, so much depth. Like and that's for such a simple concept, I think they Lucas managed to get so much into it. Very very
it
cool.
is pretty cool. There's also some like slight storyline plots in the opposite direction too. Like a guard approaches you and says, we're not making very much money up here either, and we are paid by how many people we take in. So if you have the choice when you find someone who has like a big mistake to either just refuse them or send them to the prison, basically. Yep. So the more you start sending people to prison, this guy will come and be like, hey, you brought us a whole bunch of people, here's some extra money.
Yeah.
For having like a spelling mistake on their path.
Yeah, exactly. So kind of like putting you in such a, like a low-level functionary in this world has so much moral power.
Yeah.
And that's really, really cool. Like, it's a cool thing for a video game to do. It's also like weird, strangely compelling. Like, I didn't beat it and I haven't gotten that far in it, but when I was playing it, it's like, oh, okay, made it through another day.
Right.
Like, you'd have that really intense feeling like, oh God, what are they going to spring on me? That mirrors like work, but somehow makes it feel good and make it fun.
Yeah.
That's an odd thing. Cause in real life, when some new bureaucratic, nonsense comes down that makes my job harder, I am not pleased.
Yeah.
But in Papers, Please, like, I'm into it. Like, it's like, or it's more like I'm not like happy that there's a new challenge. I'm more like, okay, I got to get through this.
Yep.
Like, it is an interesting. It plays with the idea of work in a really interesting way too.
Yeah, like I said, the mechanics, the actual gameplay itself is not what I would call fun. Like, it's not a generally fun mechanic. It's being stacked more and more rules of work.
Yeah, it's compelling.
But, it's very compelling, and it's like you said, the moral sort of routes you can take and the characters that you're put up against make the game interesting in all areas aside from the fact that the mechanics are highly work based.
Right.
It's
right.
very interesting how he can make an entertaining game out of that by putting all this other themes around it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and with very little like in the way of player reward.
Oh,
like, the game is not here to hold your hand or make give you attaboys.
Yeah, and it's not even like if you make a whole bunch of money, which you can do from helping out some of these like anti-government organizations. You can upgrade like your house, or there like a desk upgrade that let you. Oh, it was like it added a keyboard shortcut.
Yeah, there's several of those.
Yeah,
yeah.
So it's not like there's any real player reward. There's like, here's how to make your job a little easier is what you can spend your extra money on.
Yep. Yeah. And when you help that terrorist group and take their money, it just gets taken away from you too.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the game is like if games function based on like most games, if you think about the carrot and the stick, like almost all games are carrot or reward based. Like you look at something like Peggle where it's like just about you do the minorest thing and it's just about making you feel like a god. Yeah. And this is a game entirely based on like punishment. It's just like, my family's going to die if I fuck this up. I'm going to get written up, and that's just going to lead to downfall upon downfall until eventually I'm dead. And that's what, that my two endings I had was one was my family, starved to death. Mm-hmm. And the other one was I ended up taking that bribe and not getting rid of it and got arrested and they were investigating it. Yeah. Because my neighbors told on me.
Exactly. That's what happened to me too. Although by the time that happened, I was down to just my wife being alive. So.
Yeah. It's possible all my family had died at that point because I think that's, like nobody, there's nothing for my guy to live for. So just like, unrelentingly bleak. And I also just real quick, I mean, we gotta move on to the next game, but one of the things I want to talk about is how, the aesthetics of the game serve that. So in a game with more like photorealistic characters, there wouldn't be enough distance.
You couldn't you would not be able to turn away the people who are good, honest people who their paperwork isn't right. Mm-hmm. You want that disconnect, because you need to be a mindless government robot when the time calls for it.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Like it's simulating the way that people, appear to you when you are a function to them.
Yeah,
it's
so well done. That's a very good point.
Yeah. So it's well recommended. So again, it's not necessarily a review show, but please definitely check it out.
Yeah. Papers, Please, check it out. It is well worth your time and brings some very interesting themes to games you don't see very often. So.
Yeah.
All right. So let's move on to Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons.
Yep.
So this game is developed by Starbreeze Studios, who actually they kind of like ride the line as to whether or not you'd actually call them indie. They've had games published by EA. They're only like titles you probably know from the past are the Chronicles of Riddick games. So like they ride the line, but they don't have like a dedicated publisher, and they keep jumping around from like self-publishing with 505 games for this game to just downloadable markets, to actually having like big retail titles. But this game, at the very least, its themes, its like gameplay is very of the indie sort of feel to it. So I think it's well worth covering on this show. So
yeah, we won't. I mean, we're not going to define indie during the show. Like it's something. It's like art. Like when you see it, and essentially, like it is more about an aesthetic and a drive than anything else. Like we could, if it wasn't covered to death and old, like we could do like The Walking Dead on this.
Oh yeah.
Even though I mean it's not an indie game. Like Telltale's a pretty big publisher. They have tons of real estate at PAX and all that stuff. But it's an indie spirit, I guess.
Right. And worth bringing up, this game fits that definition more so than, say, Papers, Please.
Yeah, absolutely. Like this is very, very much so. So the it just came out this year, so we wanted to do it for the first episode. Like it's pretty new at this point. And so Nick, what's cool about Brothers?
So Brothers is a mostly storyline driven say adventure game where you are controlling two brothers simultaneously. Your left stick is one brother, your right stick is the other brother. Your interaction buttons are triggers on either finger. And so it kind of has a sort of Lost Vikings feel to it, except you're controlling them simultaneously instead of switching between them. But the actual the game is very linear and the puzzles aren't extraordinarily difficult or all that rewarding, but the story and the environments you go through are incredible. Like it's a very pretty, very attention-getting game that lasts maybe 3 hours. Like it is a movie that you interact with, and a very good one, in my opinion.
Yeah, and as I get older, like I get more and more into these idea of like single experiences you can have in 3 hours, or like complete experiences is a better word for it. Aesthetically it's really gorgeous, and they do a lot for that. So not only is it visually just really striking, and the design of the areas you go through is very striking, but the sound design is really good as well. Yeah, I like how the brothers speak this kind of Simlish language.
They have names because they keep calling each other the same thing, but I don't know what it is because it's in their little language. Yeah, I can't remember what it is, and you could probably learn. I'm sure that there's enough. The world is well realized enough to where there are things that they're saying. Yeah, like repeating words. Like it feels like a real language. And doing like a single player co-op game, right? Like this is just it's not necessarily the hook, but is really interesting. And there's a big payoff for it at the end. Which kind of justified it. Like up until there's a point in the middle of this game where I felt like I really loved the world and I really liked where the story was going, but I was feeling like, what is doing this simultaneous play as opposed to doing it something like the Lost Vikings where you just switch off. What is it adding to it? And then they bring that in a really big way at the end. Yeah, well, we shouldn't spoil it, but the ending really pays that off in a big way that I like a lot. The only thing I don't want to spoil it, but the one thing I think is noteworthy about it is it's a really good intersection of gameplay and story. Yeah. With, the play reinforces the story. Like they actually work together as opposed to being like most video games are play and story and they're just presented next to each other. And having them actually interact like that is really, adds a lot of power. Yeah. So let me touch on the story, just give a little intro to it real quick. Like we said, you're playing two brothers, and their father is very ill, and they need to go somewhere. They have a map to get something that the doctor said he needs in order to live. Yeah. And he didn't say this in English. He says this, just mumbling things and pointing at objects to them. But so they set off on this grand adventure to go find whatever it is they need to save their father. And so like you're just wandering through all these different environments. Some of which are just amazingly well designed. Yeah. One in particular, I'm gonna bring up just a little bit because it's so good. Is this valley of giants where like the giants had a war, and you're just like crawling over their bodies and shooting them with their own weapons that they laid down in order to move them out of your way so you can continue on the path. Yeah. It's so gorgeous and so well designed. Yeah, saying that happens isn't really a spoiler. It just the way it articulates is where the joy comes from, So the individual environments I think should be on the table.
That's an amazing scene just because of the sense of scale, that happens. Like it happens shortly after a tunnel section where it's very claustrophobic and it's very dark and dank. And then, there's kind of an interstitial scene. And then a little bit later, you're in this gigantic, the aftermath of this war and just, this kind of stunning violence in a game that is not very violent.
Yeah.
Like there's no combat.
Yeah, it's all just adventure puzzle game.
Yeah, environmental puzzle.
Yeah. And then, you come across this scene of, pretty gruesome violence even, and it's, all post anything. Like, you don't see any live giants walking around doing anything. It's all just these corpses with, large wounds that you're walking over. It's really great.
And one of the things, so we said no spoilers, but there are some, especially in some of the games we're planning to do, and in this one, there are some things we want to talk about that we can't talk about without spoiling. So the way we're going to kind of do it, which just off mic, Nick just came up with this idea, and it's really, really smart, is to do no spoilers in the body of the episode, but if you stay till the end is going to be a spoiler space. So if you're listening and this sounds good to you and you want to play Brothers, like stop the episode and go play it. And if you've already played Brothers and you want to hear us talk about these individual things, ride out till the end.
Yep.
So, one of the things about this world, did you ever read Bone?
No, I've never read Bone.
It's like a young adult comic version of like a fantasy epic, kind of Lord of the Rings.
I think my dad had some of the collected copies of it, but I don't think I've ever read it.
That's what this world reminds me of, like quite a bit. Like the design on the trolls, and I guess that's a spoiler that there's trolls, but what kind of trolls? So the design on the trolls and some of the kind of vistas and everything reminds me a lot of Bone. And in that way that's like a menacing world, but not like there's a lot of joy in the world too. Like I like the little bits where you find animals or one of the hooks, like every brother interacts with something in a different way. Each brother. So, and sometimes, one brother can be like, not into something at all, and the other one could be really amused by it and do something funny.
Mm-hmm.
So they're taking a lot of pleasure in what they're doing too. Like it's not unrelentingly grim.
Yeah, it's like a very like low fantasy, but kind of has the same themes that you'd expect from hard fantasy of like this. There's these elements of joy in this grim world, really Tolkien sort of style.
Mm-hmm.
Finding the pleasurable bits in otherwise grim dark.
Yeah. Like not least. I mean that they do that in Tolkien. There's little bits where they'll tell a story or sing a song or anything like that, and that's really important because otherwise you end up like with Dragon Age 2 or something where it's just like this unrelenting. Or like exactly. The Witcher. Where it's like that's all well and good, but it's so and not least of which are the benches.
Like, the benches are wonderful.
Yeah, if you're playing Brothers, stop at every bench because it just gives you this like panoramic view of the area you're in, and it's always gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny, like it's very obvious they put those in to show off, their settings, but it's well worth it. Like they did a really good job on all the environments, and it's nice to take a break, sit down, and have a look at what you've been walking through.
And you can imagine the characters feeling like they need that after, at the times that you need it.
Yeah.
Like you could get through an area and just like, well, that was something, let's just take a minute. And when we said there's no real, like the puzzles are all really simple, what the game does do is engage like a party. There's a section specifically where you're hanging, and this isn't really a spoiler, but the two brothers tie a rope to each other. And try to navigate something, and it engages like a part of your brain that is not often engaged, of like coordination between your two hands. That's really neat. Like I found that to be like mechanically probably the most thrilling like part of the game.
I agree. Yeah, that was definitely the most fun mechanic in the game, and like you said, it takes a second, but then you start you get into the momentum of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, at first you're like, this is awkward, and I don't get it. And then, suddenly you're just swinging all across the board. Like, it's really, really great.
It's a rub in your belly and pat in your head kind of thing.
Yeah.
The game. And I did have some problems, navigate. I never really quite, if the brothers were anywhere not near each other, I had a hard time getting them to go to the same place.
Yeah, using the right stick specifically as a means of movement on a, third-person view is very just out of element for anyone who's played games. So so it does take some getting accustomed to, and because the game's so short, really by the time you get accustomed to it, it's over. So
yeah.
But yeah, so sometimes I would like accidentally be spinning my characters around in the wrong ways and have to like reorient myself, which is a slight irritation, but not enough to ever make you stop playing the game for sure.
Yeah, and it's not there are a couple timed areas where you have to run away from something, but it's pretty rare, and the game's pretty generous. Like you're not meant to die very often in this game, and if you do, there's no consequence for it.
No consequence at all. You just pop right back to where you were.
Yep, it's not meant to be a challenge. Like unlike Papers, Please, which is meant to be a challenge and to tear you down, this game is not meant to do that. Like it's meant to ease you through it and just to appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Yeah, so Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, very good game. Available on all of the downloadable networks, so Xbox Live, PS3, PlayStation Network, and Steam.
Mm-hmm.
Well worth your time. Very good game.
Yeah, and just to say, because both these games and then the games we're going to play for the next, actually probably most games we're going to play here that are story based. Just to address the idea of like price, so people will balk at spending $15 on a 3-hour game, but think of it in terms of movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not a bad price for like an evening of entertainment in that world. Not every video game needs to be, a Skyrim or even something that just has a lot of depth, like a Binding of Isaac. Where you're gonna replay, play it and unlock every secret. Like it's okay. The world can take both.
Yes,
games are so cheap.
You don't need to compare the two against each other. Like, you don't need to compare pure hourage as a method of determining how much a game is worth.
Yes, you're not a robot.
You're not a robot.
Yeah,
so.
like you are not a spreadsheet, and don't treat your entertainment budget as if it is. Like, that's crazy.
But if you don't have the change for it, wait for it to go on sales. It inevitably will, and definitely pick it up when you can. So.
Yep, absolutely. Cool. So we will work on getting this. I'm taking the lead on this just because I'm going to work with Cole about it.
Yeah.
We'll work on getting it on iTunes.
Okay.
Shortly. It may not be when the first episode drops, but it will be shortly. And when a show starts out, ratings and reviews are the number one thing that's going to get people to see it.
Yes. So please
yep.
Rate and review if you like the show. We will very much appreciate it and love you forever.
Yeah. And tell your friends about it. If you have suggestions of stuff that might be, under our radar, like I don't see any reason not to hit us up.
And we're not specifically targeting newer games or anything of that sort. We're going to have a mix of new games and old games that we really enjoyed. There's a huge back catalog of indie games that the two of us have played that we'd like to introduce people to if they haven't already touched on it. So.
Yep, and it's not, despite this game being or this episode being overwhelming praise, not every episode is going to be, just like, so as will be evidenced in the next episode to a degree.
But every game we bring up will be worth checking out, which is why it's called Check It Out Cover.
Exactly. Good sign off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So if you've stuck with us this far, that means you probably wanted to hear our comments on a spoiler-heavy section. So, Gary, go ahead and take it away. Be warned, if you haven't played Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, you probably want to end the episode now.
Yep. Go ahead and turn off your iPod and throw it away. The thing I want to talk about first, like, there's two kind of big spoiler things. One of which, I guess they're all tied together, but so what happens to the older brother during this is, like, in the midst of your journey, you meet a lady and you save her from some tribes people in that land of the giants, and she turns out to be like a spider monster.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a thought about this, and I don't have it all put together, but like I feel like there's an element of Brothers that could be seen as like an allegorical for growing up.
Yeah.
A lot of the games and the bosses you're doing, like, kind of mirror childhood games. Like, you are playing, with the troll, you're kind of doing like a keep away kind of thing. Like, one person's doing like trying, just kind of a tag, and then you do kind of a freeze tag with the invisible giant.
Right.
Like, oh, you can't do anything when I'm standing still. Like, they feel like childhood games. And then when the older brother becomes interested in sex and wants to, starts becoming romantically interested in the Spider Woman, he's kind of punished for it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I mean,
that's an interesting thought. I like that.
yeah, yeah. I don't know it, and if so, I mean, you could read that in a real sex negative way, but it also could just be, you're going to lose since the game is so about this like majesty and wonder. You do lose that when you become an adult.
Yeah.
So him getting older, he's kind of metaphorically, losing this at the same, and then he literally loses it in the game by getting murdered.
Well, it could also be, determined as being seen, the childhood allegory being seen from the little brother's eyes. Like,
yeah.
He's seeing his big brother, and, at points when you're entering the cave that she's leading you into, like, the little brother's like, no, why would we go in there?
Exactly.
And so it could very much be seen as he's seeing his brother grow up and doesn't want him to, and thinks he should be, that's the wrong route for him to go to, and then of course it does end up being the actual wrong route for him to go to.
Yeah, and it's telling that like that boss fight, the way it ends, where like the older brother, it ends with you tearing the legs off of an insect, like a helpless insect, which is a straight up like adolescent hormonal shithead teen boy thing to do.
Right.
So like at that point when you've crossed that threshold, that's it for you. So
Yeah.
like as a game about childhood, or like kind of like a right way, because it's also about growing up as like is told by the actual ending, but in different kind of ways. Like there's like, they kind of contrast the trappings of growing up, which is this kind of, fixation on violence and sex, and then actually growing up, which is, independence and learning.
Conquering your fears.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And so,
Beautiful game.
And then the actual end, so like the brother dies,
Yeah.
and then so you get this, and that's the big twist of the game. It's very sad. But the cool way in which the mechanics play into it is that you were faced with all these challenges that you could only do with the brother's assistance before. And then now you press your younger self can jump higher and run faster and such if you kind of invoke the brother by using the button that, so
used to be him.
Yeah, which is really clever because you're going to reach out to that instinctively.
Yeah.
And then you pull it from yourself.
Right.
So, the player is doing the thing that matches the character.
I think the water scene is the only time you actually have to use it to get past anything, but like the whole time the little brother's scared of water, and then you're at this body of water, your big brother's dead, whereas before you'd always be hanging on to him, he would swim you across everything.
Mm-hmm.
And he will not enter the water, and then you press that other button and invoke the big brother, and he conquers his fears just enough to get past this little stream.
And there's no hokey video game-ness to it. He's not like a summon from Final Fantasy that like comes and shows up, and you don't get like a glowing ghost brother that leads you through it. Like that's the strength, he realizes like, oh, this is what, I can call on this, like doing what I need to do. And that was more than like the actual brother's death, which like at a certain point I kind of started to expect was going to happen. I mean, whenever you have a game like that has this kind of aesthetic and there's two things, like one of them's going to die.
Right.
That was the part where I really fell in love with that part of the game, was just that I love games where the play and the graphics and sound and everything contributes to an idea rather than just being a movie that you're also holding a controller next to.
Yep.
So, yeah, very good.
Very good. All right, I think that's the end of our spoiler section as well. Thanks for sticking through it, and we'll see you next time.